I'm here today with the very awesome, daring and disruptive Lisa Messenger. And Lisa and I have just had a little bit of time to connect. And, you know, I want to preface to everyone watching this interview that I want you to take something from this interview that is about, even when everything feels like the weight is on your shoulders, even when things feel like they're breaking apart, that it's actually really an opportunity to look at it differently and rebuild. And who better to do this than Lisa Messenger? Because Lisa, you have recreated yourself and your businesses time and time again. And that's the one thing I'm so inspired about you all the time, is your capacity to be fearless, to be brave, and to disrupt and do things differently. So first of all, welcome, Lisa.
Thank you. It is good to be here, and I love that introduction. And we were just talking offline before we started this about there's nothing off limits at all, and I think that's the only way that we actually help each other, is by talking about the difficult times. And yeah, I've had businesses for nearly 18 years, so there's little I haven't seen or experienced or failed at. So yeah, let's dig right into whatever you want to talk about.
All right, sounds awesome. So I really want to dive into the Collective Hub magazine and that business for you, because that's where a lot of people first got to know who you were. I mean, you've been in business for such a long time, publishing books and for yourself and for others for a long time, but that's really where sort of your fame in Australia and overseas got known. So before we talk about what changed in that, tell me about the pinnacle of that business. Like, how did it feel? What was happening for you when it was at its peak?
Oh my God, and I'm just looking at all my 53 babies sitting in front of me. 53 print mags. So at its peak, I mean, that was insane. It was, and going back a little bit, like, I launched the print mag in March 2013, and I launched my first business in October 2001. So it was like, you know, well, 11, 12-year overnight success. And I think that's really important for everyone to remember. And thank you for the word fame. I don't know about that, but you know, it was literally like, I literally went from being a nobody and not really having any semblance of my purpose and things, almost overnight, to being so steadfast in my vision and my purpose and this unwavering, insatiable self-belief. And literally, I dropped the print mag. I don't know if anyone remembers, but March 2013, and overnight it became this almost global sensation. I mean, within 18 months, the print magazine was in 37 countries. And that was literally from me going from standstill, never having worked in media or for magazines, you know, just literally, and we can talk more about this because I think it's one of the most important things in life and in business, is having a really strong sense of purpose and what your why is. And then, I mean, I wrote a whole book about this called Purpose, but then the how almost has a way of taking care of itself. So I just launched it because I wanted something for entrepreneurs to tell the story behind the story, to be raw and real and relatable and attainable. And, you know, the night that I dropped that magazine, I could have had no idea if it would work or if it would fail. I mean, so many things before had failed, and it's just that this one just went nuts. So at the pinnacle, I've never experienced anything like it, and it almost was overnight. I mean, I woke up the next morning to something like 600 emails in my inbox, and you know, the magazine dropped into 3,506 news agencies in Australia, and my mum and I went to Bondi Junction in Sydney, and it was sitting there front and center in between Marie Claire, Vogue, Harper's, and we were just like screaming and crying and couldn't kind of believe it. And from there, it just went wild. So within 18 months, I had an email from, it said in the subject line, from the office of Anna Wintour. And I was like, is this a prank? And literally, Collective Hub had, you know, gotten onto her radar. And for anyone who doesn't know who I'm talking about, think about Devil Wears Prada or the September issue. And Anna asked me to fly to New York to the Condé Nast headquarters and meet with her. And, you know, so then I got invited to spend time on Richard Branson's Necker Island, you know, pretty much before anyone much had been there in the I don't know, well, certainly from Australia or in the general business sphere. And then I got invited after that to co-chair the Virgin Way conference with him in Sydney. And then, you know, so it was heady and amazing. I was the only person who was invited, when was it, maybe 2 years ago, when Jamie Oliver was in Australia, to put him on the cover of Collective. We were the only cover to have him, and I spent quite a long time with him discussing the future of magazines, etc. As it turns out, his sadly has since closed. Yeah, so heady, amazing, extraordinary, going from literally 11 years of bumbling along, over-servicing, undercharging, being everything to everyone, living life according to other people's expectations, to dropping this thing and just like this freaking explosion. It gives me like shivers in every part of my body thinking about it, because the opportunities that opened up and the collaborations and, you know, everything else is just like, well, fairly well charted in 7 books that I've now written in 5.5 years. So yeah, I've been writing books in real time through that period to kind of talk about everything, the good, the bad, the ugly. There's a lot of it.
And I can imagine too, like going from, as you say, like almost an overnight success, like that would have put a huge strain on the finances of the procedures of your business and everything, because you didn't know whether it was going to go gangbusters or, you know, just tick along. So how did you deal with all of that?
So that is one of the best questions anyone could ever ask, because it's fascinating. And last year I wrote a whole book called Risk and Resilience, which covered all of this. And it's really interesting because I'm very conscious about my decisions and my languaging. And it's really interesting, and lots of people watching this, listening to this, reading this will relate. So I literally, for 11 years, couldn't work out how to scale a business. I never had more than 3 staff. And it was a very profitable business. You know, it's a couple of $1 million in revenue at best, but it was very profitable. I was pulling a lot of money out of the business, and I managed to buy 4 properties with that business. And like, you know, I was comfortable, but comfortable's a bit boring, a bit safe. Then when I launched Collective with 3 of us, literally within a couple of years, there were 32 full-time staff and over $3 million in fixed salaries. Of the 32, only 3 people were writers or commissioning articles. So if you think about it, it was a global media business, but 29 of the people didn't even, you know, weren't associated with writing. So it was a very cost heavy business. And the reason I say I'm conscious about my languaging is when it all got very big, and I mean, that doesn't sound big, but I had so many other consultants. I mean, there was probably 300 or so people working, you know, around the globe in various capacities, and it suddenly became a multi-million dollar business. And so be careful what you step into, because I found my vision and my purpose, and I'm so strong and resolute, but I am like a brilliant visionary leader. I see things before they even start. I'm a creative. I love like moving forward. But suddenly when you have a business of that magnitude, and you don't have the systems and processes in place, as I didn't, and also I'd never been a CEO of a business that big, suddenly it all became about operations and HR and IT and finance and legal and, you know, all that stuff, and I can't stand that. And so suddenly I went from being really juiced up and in flow to like feeling like I was hemorrhaging cash and I felt like I was in survival mode and drowning. So and it was interesting, my boyfriend in the middle of it said, but you chose this. And I was like, I chose to step into something I thought would be amazing, but it's actually very different when you're in it. And the interesting thing about business or life is until you're actually there and experiencing it for yourself, you can intellectualize it, you can read about it, you can talk to other people about it. But I wasn't really prepared for the enormity of that growth. And so what happened was I made some very silly decisions, and I hired some, you know, I always say hire your weaknesses, like the things that I'm not great at. And I didn't understand a lot of the digital side of the business. So I hired some very, very expensive, you know, digital people. And then I kind of stepped away and I didn't learn it so well. And I learned print inside out. I knew events inside out, which was a big part of our business because that was largely my background. But the digital side of the business, I didn't really learn enough about. And I don't think you can be a good leader if you just hand that off and entrust that to someone else and believe that they're going to do a great job. And so the business did start hemorrhaging a lot of money, and I had to make people redundant, which was horrible because at the time, 16 and a half years of business, I'd never made a single person redundant. And so it suddenly became extraordinarily difficult. And my vision and my purpose had not changed one bit, and I don't believe it will until the day I die. However, luckily from launch, I had said, don't be too fixated on the delivery mechanism. And so that's when I needed to be courageous enough to break it. And by break it, I mean cut the absolute guts out of the cost base and reevaluate, okay, this business is amazing, but I need to break it in its current form because it grew too quickly. It had way too many costs, fixed office space, $3 million plus in salaries, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so it was grossly inefficient. And so I couldn't operate and be the best version of me and therefore serve our community when it was like that. So it kind of went from like this amazing story that I loved every bit of it to I'm drowning and I just can't do this. And but so many people fumble along for years and years, and because they're embarrassed or their identity's wrapped up in that. People often say to me, what's the most courageous thing you've ever done? And I would say it's twofold. Having the courage to start Collective Hub and having the courage to break Collective Hub.
Totally. And I totally get that because, say, in our last issue of the magazine, we had Samantha Wills.
Yes, a very good friend of mine.
Yeah. And, I love in her story that she got that courage to, her business is like seeming like it's massive and it's fantastic, it's successful, but it wasn't filling up her soul. There was parts of her that she was like, for her, that visionary and creative keeps getting squashed by all of the other stuff. And I get that with you as well. And, for me, this is not an interview about me, but I've had a similar story recently that I've taken back my magazine. And, it's with all of the people forget that magazines come with a truckload of overhead, especially print mags, which we've been doing, crazy truckload. And so I just came in, I had to just slash.
Yeah.
Slash staff, offices, everything. And literally to the point I kept, slashing. And I'm going, the only thing left is the actual print magazine. For me, after that magazine had been going for over 10 years, I literally had the courage to say, this is no longer what we want. So we actually went digital, and Samantha was on the cover of our first digital magazine. So for you then, what did you decide? Because you did 52 issues of print and then you stopped, but you had another one come back out. So
yeah,
that happened.
Okay, so and I always am concerned, did I confuse the market? So what happened was I just got to a point where I was like, this just isn't sustainable. I can't keep going. I've got to make the courageous decision to close the print mag and just like strip it all back and really understand, what's happened with business. So I did that. Issue 52 was April 2018. And then once I'd had time to, like a couple of months to actually just breathe and really look closely, when you're creative, data and financials are absolutely everything. So I spent a few months just like really looking at all of that really, really closely. And what I realized was actually it wasn't the print magazine that was so much the problem. It was actually, in my case, the digital. And that was purely because we were doing 8 stories a day. We were paying writers $300 to $500 a story online. So that was a very cost-heavy part of the business. And we just weren't selling, advertising. We weren't putting the revenue against the expenditure of that part of the business. And so once I looked at it all, I was like, oh my God, come out of this fog. I realized that we'd already commissioned, which means, got writers to write an entire other issue, which we'd also subbed and edited and largely laid it into design. That's the process of a magazine, as you know. And so I said to Amy, my editor and my art director, my gosh, well, we've got one sitting here. Like, we've paid for all of those costs of the editing, the sub-editing, we've done all these articles. So the only cost, you know, to put that one out was to print it. And I knew we've got such a, you know, incredible audience and community who love the mag. So I was like, well, you know, at least half of the costs had already been absorbed and paid for. So that's why we decided to bring issue 53 out, which I did in December 2018. And luckily when I closed it in April, I said, if I can find a way to bring this back and make it happen, I will. And I mean, that's always tricky because I think, like, everyone was so happy to see it back, but I think you've also got to be careful, as I do, around my brand and people being like, we're confused, hang on, did you close it or didn't you close it? So I'm trying to, in fact, we've just done issue 54, which will go to print in about 3 weeks, because, and that's all about tech. I mean, I love print. I absolutely love it. You know, I keep writing books and I'm now producing journals and diaries and things. And so I've always said, if I can, you know, produce them every now and again, then I'll do it. So there's no hard and fast rule around when or how. It's just like when I feel inspired and my team want to do it and we've got a gap in our calendar and we've got the time and space to do it, we'll do it in a controlled way, because we've got extraordinary distribution. You know, Newslink and WH Smith and all the amazing news agencies in Australia and across the globe have supported us, and the community is kind of ready to buy. So when I can do it, I will do it.
Isn't that courageous as well? Because often in business, we're told you've got to be consistent. Everyone needs to know exactly what you're doing. You need to have a plan. But this is, I think, like the new way of doing business. It's like, well, do you know what? If it feels good to me and supports me in my business, I will do it. But I'm not going to be beholden to what the market tells me I have to do.
Exactly. And there's also, yeah, exactly. There's also a really important thing around that, because in business, if you have a lot of fixed costs and, you know, overheads and stuff, and it's ongoing, then you don't have the luxury of just breaking something and starting it again when you want to. But in the last year, I've decentralized my entire team. My latest book, Work From Wherever, everyone's working from wherever they want to. It's based on KPIs, so key performance indicators, and data and output, and everyone has their own budgets, and it's all project by project. So what's interesting about that way of doing business is you don't have this constant, you know, fixed costs where you almost have to continue to put a mag out every month or whatever it is, because you've got 32 people or 100 people or whatever it is sitting in a seat that need work to do. But now that I've chosen to decentralize everything and make it project by project, I can bring teams in as and when I want, and it gives me much more flexibility and fluidity. And it's an interesting way of working, because for that 11 years when I only had 3 staff, if people said to me, oh, do you work from home, or how many staff do you have? It was like, the more staff you had or the bigger your office was seemed to be a measure of success. And my identity and possibly ego was wrapped up in that. Yet now, having gone to the big global business with the multi-million dollar turnover, I've actually chosen consciously to go back to, actually, I don't want any full-time staff. I want everyone on a contract basis and freelancers, and I want to do project by project. And it's the most beautiful, exciting, exhilarating way to work, because now I've actually got multiple businesses and I'm doing a very big launch probably later, either end of this year or early next year. I haven't quite decided yet. But the thing is, I've got extraordinary people, like the most extraordinary people I could ever find, but everyone's project by project. So, yeah, I've just redefined, I think, what success means, and also that business is like the most amazing thing, but not if your lifestyle is suffering or your health is suffering or you're feeling like you're hemorrhaging cash every day and you have to come home, as I did for a long time, and cry unceremoniously on the bathroom floor. I mean, when Collective really, you know, was hemorrhaging cash, that's what I would do most days. And that's hard, you know, you come home and cry and think, and then you got to front up the next day. And when I started my business, it seemed like everything was in increments of $100 and, you know, maybe $1,000. And suddenly everything I mean, everything. Every day was increments of $100,000. Every day my CFO, my chief financial officer would say to me, we need another $100,000 every freaking day. And I am the queen of like ideas and, so I kept being like, we'll do another event, or we'll do another mag, or we'll do this or do that. So I was always coming up with new ways to make money and partnerships and collaborations. But there's a very big difference about doing that when you need to survive, and when you actually do it because it's fun and juicy and you love it. And I couldn't care less about money for money's sake. I just couldn't care. It's not what drives me in any way, shape or form. But when the business got so big, suddenly it was all about, we need another $100,000, we need another $100,000. And that, after a while, wears pretty thin and drops you to your knees.
And I hear this from a lot of women too, that because there was such a success-driven way of getting ahead, and we all kind of, especially in our age bracket, we all measured success by like having that beautiful office and the big team and how much money I can make. But one lesson I've been learning, is, it's not about just making more money to plug the holes. Because I'm like you, tell me what you need, I'll go make the money. I can come up with the ideas. But at some point, it's really got to stop. So for you, from a personal perspective, was there a pinnacle point that you went, oh, God, this is enough for me? Like what, I know, for example, I don't know if we can talk about this. Actually, you said you can talk about anything. Your dad suffered a heart attack and passed away. Was that something for you that was a real wake-up call?
Yes and no. Funnily enough, I mean, I was so fortunate to have this incredible weekend with Dad up at his property. He has an apple orchard in Orange, of all places. And so I had spent 2 days with him up there, driving the tractor and feeding the cows, and like it was the most beautiful weekend. And it was interesting. It was Sunday, the 17th of September, and I said to him, Dad, I'm going to sell the business, or I'm going to close the business, or I'm going to, do something with the business because it's driving me into the ground. And he said, yep, great idea. And it was the next day that he died of a heart attack. So I made that decision and I voiced it to him, which was quite beautiful, and we had the most amazing weekend. But then that happened. So then I had this life throws you, stuff all at once. So then I was like trying to work out how to wind out of the business, which was in a very unhealthy state at the time. And then, the very next day, work out how to organize my dad's funeral and navigate something, so I was navigating two things that I'd never navigated, and both of them were coming at me hard and fast. I had these guys that I appointed to try and help me either get investors or sell or do something with the business, and they were like, we need this, we need this, we need this. I had my CFO saying, we need another $100,000, we need another $100,000. And then on this side I had my dad's lawyer and all of that kind of thing going, you need to organize a funeral, and you're the executor of the estate, and so you need to do this. And like, then I was really drowning, and so the most important thing, and I mean, I've written lots of books about this, like Life and Love, about the importance of rituals and routines and, working on yourself. And, I've done years of therapy and everything else. But when two things so big came at me at once, I was just, I had several horrible anxiety attacks, and just it was a really tough time. But yeah, a massive wake-up call as well, because for anyone watching or listening who's experienced something as traumatic as a sudden death of a family member or someone who's really close to you, it's, where am I even trying to go? It's completely debilitating, and I can't remember my train of thought. I've gone up into dad land. It made so many things around me just, I was probably at my angriest almost, because so many things that were almost of no consequence, or ridiculous conversations that were happening around me, suddenly I just thought, this means nothing. Someone just died and this stuff is still going on. And my tolerance level for like ridiculous minutia became almost zero. I was like, I just don't care at the moment. Like, and I think that, so yes, to answer your question in a long and then short way, I think it definitely puts things into perspective. And it was definitely like, you know, I've always been in business because I love business and it's fun. And as soon as it wasn't fun, I was like, nah, I'm just not doing this anymore. I'm just not doing it. So, you know, it's like whatever cost, which, you know, was very difficult, you know, financially, and also, you know, having to make people redundant. And that was all hideous because they were, you know, and are still my friends. So that was incredibly difficult. But I was like, sometimes, I don't know, you got a short-term pain for long-term gain. I was like, I just can't keep going along like this. And the reality is, unfortunately, as a business owner or someone experiencing grief, unless you're the one in it, I've realized that no one really truly understands. So in one way, I mean, my staff, I was showing, this is the bottom line, this is the financials, this is what's going on. And they'd be kind of almost like this, oh, wow, okay. And then like, it was almost felt like half an hour later, someone would be like, oh, can I have a salary increase? And I was like, oh my God. And then in the same way, people, you know, when someone dies, they're kind of like there for the first day, oh my God, how are you feeling? And then it's like business as usual the next day. So yeah, two excruciatingly hard things. And so I just made a decision, I think, then and there to go, nah, nothing's worth it. You know, like life should be fun. Life should be full of joy. And if things are really draining us and we're not actually able to be the best version of ourselves because all sorts of other external factors are sabotaging, or internal factors, then it's time to break shit and move on. Yeah.
How does it feel now to you? I know you were saying, you know, you've got a different way of working. So how does it feel personally for you having contractors instead of all that heavy weight, and, you know, no one's turning up every day asking for another $100,000? How does it feel for you?
It's amazing. I mean, it is incredible, and it takes some adjustment because, you know, I think there's something quite beautiful about, you know, having a place to go each day and having a, you know, gorgeous 32 staff who you adore, and, you know, the energy around, you know, collaboration, coming up with ideas and getting excited together and sharing that sense of community is beautiful. But so sometimes I miss that a little bit, but it's amazing how resilient and, you know, flexible and adaptable we are. This way of working, I much prefer, like, it far outweighs the benefits of that, because the beauty of this is I'm now running 3 businesses, and 2 of which I can talk about in a few months. So Collective Hub still, you know, consists of the online, and then, you know, books and printed products and a few events and bits and pieces. But then I have 2 other startups. Now, the beauty of this is when I was in the office, it would be like 32 people would be in on one conversation, and it was, you know, very unproductive, and everyone knew exactly what was going on in the business. And so there was a lot of conversations and a lot of meetings and a lot of managers and managing managers, you know. But now I have different teams for different projects. So my Collective Hub team are working on, you know, all of that that I previously discussed. But then my startups are completely different teams. And so there's no inefficiencies because people are working on exactly what they need to work on, and they're not distracted because, you know, everyone loves bright, shiny things. So if my Collective Hub team knew particularly about one of my startups, they would be like, oh my God, amazing. And I need them to focus on, you know, producing amazing stuff over there. And so it's really good that these other teams are focused on what they need to be focused on. So it's actually quite extraordinary because my output, I mean, I'm sitting at home, this is my home here. I'm sitting at home today, and, you know, I don't know, I mean, my team now is certainly bigger than it was when I had a full-time office, but, you know, I have 3 different lots of teams out there working and being productive as I'm sitting here at home chatting to you, you know. And I went and did the Bondi to Bronte this morning, and I've had a very lovely, relaxing morning. And also they're really happy. I mean, a lot of my staff that worked, you know, full-time in our office in Surrey Hills are now working, you know, remotely. And Em, my art director, is in Greece for 5 weeks at the moment getting married, you know, and we are on and off emails and things. But the thing now is people can work from wherever they want as long as the output is there. So I'm much happier. Yeah, I think everyone seems to be happier. It takes, as I said, it takes some discipline, more discipline, because you know you can't get up and open the fridge and kind of like what's for breakfast or what's for lunch all day every day, and you've got to have certain rituals and routines that keep you focused. And but we use amazing tools like Asana, so my whole team is on Asana for different projects, and so we report regularly, and there's all our to-do lists sitting there. We use Zoom a lot, we use Slack, so we all feel very connected. It's just that we're not physically in the same space a lot, and sometimes if ever, to be honest.
Yeah, and that's what I love about the new book, Work From Anywhere, which is on my desk over there.
Everyone says that. It's work from wherever, but everyone says work from anywhere. I should have called it that. Everyone says that.
I'll get it right. I think that the culture of the world where I've been working from home since I've had my children. My children are 4 and 6 years old now. I literally haven't worked in an office with people since then, and I love it. I love it. People say to me all the time, like, don't you go and do the washing? You're like, no, that's the least thing that I'd be doing. Like,
yeah.
I mean, we're very blessed. My husband's an actor, so he doesn't have a traditional job that he goes off to every day. So
yeah,
he's looking after the kids and doing the washing and all that kind of thing. But I think as a culture, we're really breaking out of that going to an office 9 to 5. Even just from an employee perspective, most people are wanting to have more fun and more lifestyle. So
exactly.
The question I want to ask you, like, for you, what is fun other than business? Like, what do you do for fun? What lights you up?
So yesterday, I still have 2 of my 4 investment properties. I sold 2 as bridging finance when Collective Hub was hemorrhaging. So I no longer have those. But I love. So yesterday I had one in Bondi, and if anyone was watching Instagram, I've been decking that out and doing a makeover and painting the bathroom tiles white. They were blue, and so I love any kind of creative pursuit like that. I love like interiors and that kind of thing. I also love being in nature. I mean, most weekends, so my weeks are relatively regimented, but my partner and I have a thing where we pretty much try to not plan anything too much on weekends, but we're mostly at the beach or in nature with our dog Benny, and a lot of family stuff. We're very, very family orientated, and I have a lot of dinner parties, so we are fairly well known for having dinners for 14 to 16 people every few weeks, and I think that's really important. So for me, it's like I love cooking and connection. So yeah, anything kind of creative pursuits that aren't, my work, like writing and I don't know, all sorts of things. But I just love being creative, whether it's cooking or doing interiors or doing places up. And I think, no matter how successful you get, don't underestimate, getting your hands dirty and, going barefoot and getting in and mucking things out. And I find that kind of thing really cathartic and grounding. And yeah, so things we love. I also love, we go indoor rock climbing. Sometimes I'll go to the driving range and hit golf balls, or my partner and I will play tennis. So, I'm pretty very, very active and a lot in nature, and it's often different creative pursuits and things. So yeah, but we're always trying different things. So I think it's really important, and I think that's a great misnomer as well. Like when you're an entrepreneur or you have your own business, it's like I've got to work all the time. Well, what I've found is that my best ideas always come when I'm on a rock climbing wall, or I'm walking on the beach, or I'm cooking for friends, or whatever it happens to be. So I love all of that stuff, and we travel a fair bit as well. So yeah, I just live life, push the limits on everything, really.
And that's what's made you an absolute trailblazer in Australia and overseas. And I really thank you from my heart to have someone like you to trailblaze, to show women there's another way of living, there's another way of doing things, and that even though on the outside it may look like you're at the pinnacle of success, if it's not filling you up within, then it's time to break it.
Yeah, thank you. And yeah, you mentioned Samantha before. I mean, I broke Collective in April, and I think she decided to close Samantha Wheels like it was only like 4 to 6 weeks after, and Jodie Fox with Shoes of Prey, Sarah Wilson with I Quit Sugar, like so many of my girlfriends, I think, you know, around the same time. And I think that's the beauty of, you know, you almost give permission to others by saying it's okay, and then other people sometimes are like, oh, thank God I can do this too. So yeah, I think just live life according to your own terms. And I think what I would say is, yeah, if something's not juicing you up or you don't feel like you're being the best version of yourself, then yeah, be unafraid to break it and change things, and just know within yourself, I guess that's where the unwavering self-belief comes in, is that it will be okay and you will rebuild in a more sustainable way. So yeah.
Beautiful. All right. Well, thank you so much for your time today, Lisa. It's been an
Thank you.
absolute pleasure. Thanks.
Thank you.